Hello everyone, I am Dr. Anirban Das Gupta, Assistant Professor at the Department of Biotechnology, the Nyokia University, West Bengal. Today I will be talking about wastewater treatment and purification, sustaining the modern civilization. Now, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, we have seen that human civilization has seen a period of unprecedented growth that has been fueled by technological innovations and utilization as well as overexploitation of nature and natural resources. Now, this has led to our lives being much easier than what it used to be. However, irresponsible utilization and exploitation of natural resources like water has led to widespread degradation of water quality as well as pollution. Needless to say that these irresponsible discharge practices, as coupled with overexploitation of water, has led to this kind of pollution and degradation of the water resources. Obviously, we need to develop technologies to treat the wastewater that is being generated in a responsible manner and then discharge them into natural water systems. Now we have been able to develop such water technologies that treat wastewater that we produce and then either discharge this into natural water systems or reuse them or repurpose them for other applications. Now, depending on the nature of the wastewater, we must apply these wastewater treatment technologies. Now, there are different types of wastewater in the world, ranging from domestic sewage to agricultural wastewater, wastewater generated during animal husbandry activities, industrial wastewater like wastewater generated from pharmaceutical industries, or wastewater generated from mining activities. And the treatment technology that we have to apply must depend on the nature of the wastewater that is being produced. Today, I would like to talk about the single largest form of wastewater in the world, that is domestic sewage. Now, domestic sewage is produced by almost every single household almost anywhere in the world. There are different wastewater treatment technologies, and we are going to talk about the most common and prevalent form of wastewater treatment for the single largest form of wastewater in the world, that is conventional wastewater treatment. As you can see here, that this image is one such large-scale wastewater treatment facility. That this image is from San Francisco, California, where we find that wastewater is treated using multiple engineered systems like tanks or ponds that are used in a sequential manner. Now, before I get into the specific nitty-gritty of the wastewater treatment technology, let me first explain what type of technology we need to apply. And for that, we must first of all define wastewater. And wastewater is always defined in terms of standard water quality parameters that accurately describe the different facets of the wastewater. So, if we try to understand wastewater, we must first try to understand wastewater quality in terms of standard water quality parameters. In case of domestic sewage, one of the most important and predominant factors is the presence of excess organic matter, which predominantly exists in reduced form. Now, this reduced organic matter exerts a pressure on the oxygen availability, and therefore domestic sewage is usually devoid of dissolved oxygen. Now we know that dissolved oxygen is essential for the sustenance of any form of aquatic life. So we define this particular organic matter and we measure this particular organic excess reduced organic matter in terms of various chemical parameters, specifically total organic carbon, which is basically a measure of the total organic matter that is present in any wastewater. Now, this can also be measured in terms of chemical oxygen demand. Now, what is chemical oxygen demand? It is basically an indirect measure of the organic matter that is present in wastewater, and it is measured as the amount of chemical oxidants that are required to oxidize the organic matter that is present. And biochemical oxygen demand, or BOD, which is a very common and widely used wastewater quality parameter, is basically the amount of oxygen required by microorganisms to oxidize the organic matter that is present in a given sample of wastewater. Now, besides reduced organic matter or organic carbon, there are other nutrients which are also present in excess quantities. Particularly of concern are, of course, nitrogen and phosphorus. And the oxygen demand that is exerted by the presence of nitrogen, specifically organic nitrogen, is known as nitrogen oxygen demand, and this is usually higher than biochemical oxygen demand. Now the second most important parameter, or the second parameter which is of particular importance and concern, is fecal contamination of domestic sewage, because we know that domestic sewage is typically rich in fecal contamination. But how do we measure fecal contamination? We measure fecal contamination by using an indicator organism or a group of indicator organisms known as coliforms. How do we define coliforms? Now, coliforms have particular criteria. Now, they must be facultatively anaerobic. Now, they must be gram-negative, non-spore forming, rod-shaped bacteria that are capable of fermenting lactose with gas formation within 48 hours of incubation at 35 degrees Celsius. The common examples of fecal coliforms include E. coli or Klebsiella pneumoniae. If these microorganisms are found in a given sample of wastewater, then this indicates that there must be some kind of fecal contamination, and there is a test known as most probable number index, and based on that index we can decide the degree of fecal contamination. If the MPN index is very high, suppose 1000 uh, 1000 coliforms per, let's say, 10 ml of water, that water is unsafe for any kind of human usage, and it has been heavily contaminated with fecal matter. Now, these are the standard water quality parameters. There are, of course, many other water quality parameters like pH, like temperature, like redox potential, and we must look at these parameters to understand how wastewater is being treated. And if the values of these parameters are reduced, for example, if BOD, which is expressed in parts per million, of is reduced, or fecal coliform number gets reduced, it indicates that our treatment technology is working and the wastewater is being treated. Now, conventional wastewater treatment for municipal sewage, like I said, utilizes multiple ponds or multiple engineered systems that are used in a sequential manner. Here we can see an aerial view of a typical wastewater treatment plant, and in this, each of these uh, tanks or ponds or engineered systems, wastewater is treated sequentially, and there are different stages of this wastewater treatment. Now, these common stages are known as primary treatment, secondary treatment, and tertiary treatment. Primary treatment is essentially involves the removal of suspended solids, like suspended particulate matter, and the most commonly used method is sedimentation by action of gravity. Sometimes some chelating agents like alum are occasionally used to remove the excess suspended particulate matter. Secondary treatment of municipal sewage treatment technology is the most energy intensive as well as the most cost intensive process. And here we have different technologies like trickling filters, like extended radiation, or like activated sludge systems. And these are responsible for removing almost 90 to 95% of BOD. And we will come to these treatment technologies in the later sections of this session. And of course, finally, we have tertiary treatment, where there is biological removal as well as chemical removal of excess nutrients, like, let's say, nitrogen and phosphorus, which are essentially removed predominantly using chemical agents. In the primary treatment, we have the action of gravity, sedimentation due to gravity, or use of mild chemicals like chelating agents. In secondary treatment, the the main catalyst or the main agent of change is biological in nature. It's the activity of microorganisms that consume the organic matter and the excess nutrients, thereby reducing the BOD or the biochemical oxygen demand. And finally, in tertiary treatment, which is heavily dependent on chemical agents to remove excess phosphorus or remove excess nitrogen. Now, let us come to the treatment technologies or the stages of these treatment technologies one by one. So, we have primary treatment. As we can see here, in primary treatment, the the water is allowed to stand for a given period of time, which allows the sedimentation due to gravity to take place, which results in almost 30%. Usually it's around 20 to 25% of BOD that gets removed, because the biochemical oxygen demand that is associated with the suspended solids gets removed or gets reduced. Now, next comes the secondary treatment, which, like I said before, is the most energy intensive as well as the most cost intensive process. Here, the main agent of change are microorganisms and the activity of microorganisms. However, this requires significant technological interventions by which the BOD is significantly reduced by almost 90 to 95%. The common wastewater treatment technologies are activated sludge, we have trickling filters, or we have extended aeration processes. Now, these are not used together, but these can be used individually, and any of these treatment technologies basically qualify as secondary treatment. If there is proper secondary treatment, we find that microorganisms form these kind of structures. This is proper sludge formation, and this sludge also has many downstream applications, like they can be used as fertilizers, or they can be used as sludge for other treatment processes, and they have many other applications. This is also obtained from primary treatment as well, but the significant amount of sludge that is produced is usually during secondary treatment. Now, if there is improper sludge formation, that is improper growth of microorganisms, some unwarranted microorganisms may grow, which are filamentous in nature, and we have flocculation. That is really an inefficient process, which results in inadequate removal of BOD, and this flocculation is not as simple to remove as sludge is. So, moving on to the specific treatment technologies, let's start with the activated sludge. Here we have a diagram, a schematic diagram, which shows how activated sludge systems work. So essentially, we have these mixers which ensure aeration and the availability of oxygen. Now, this is the aeration basin, and uh, water from the primary treatment process or the primary clarifiers is introduced into this aeration basins, and this mixing happens through by the help of these impellers, and this leads to biomass production, and the microorganisms growing here essentially utilize the organic matter that is present in wastewater as a form of nutrient, and thereby removes the excess nutrient. And we move on to the final clarifier, where we have the treated water on top, and this kind of conical shape results in efficient flocculation or efficient sedimentation of the sludge that is produced, and this sludge is again is recycled for the activated sludge system, because here we have a population of actively growing microorganisms. Some of the excess sludge is used for they can be used as biofertilizers, or they may be used for to produce bioenergy, and the activated sludge is also returned in this type of system. So here we can see with the help of this schematic diagram, we find that the activated sludge system can be a very efficient treatment system to remove almost 90 to 95% of BOD. Second intervention method that we have is basically trickling filters. Now, trickling filters have these large aeration basins, and the water that has been produced by primary treatment is distributed onto a bed of sand and gravel through these kind of distribution booms, and this results in heterotrophic growth of microorganisms on the rocky and the sand surfaces. This leads to formation of biofilms, and the microorganisms that grow within these biofilms utilize the excess nutrient that is present in the wastewater very rapidly and remove the excess nutrients, thereby resulting in the formation of excess of treated wastewater. Now, what are biofilms? Biofilms are defined as a self-produced matrix of extracellular polymeric substances that are produced by microorganisms, and these provide a stable microenvironment and niche to the microorganisms, to the population of microorganisms in an otherwise hostile environment. So these microorganisms adhere to the level surfaces by formation of biofilms, which are made up of extracellular polymeric substances such as polysaccharides, proteins, and in some cases, in some very rare cases, nucleic acids. And these provides a stable microenvironment which enables the microorganisms to uptake the nutrients much more rapidly, and this results in the removal of excess nutrients from the municipal sewage, which results in the production of treated wastewater. Now, this wastewater will obviously be subjected to tertiary treatment, which will then render them suitable for either surf or either discharge or any other downstream application or recycling purposes. And now finally we have another example of secondary treatment. These are known as extended aeration processes. What happens in this type of extended aeration processes? We have very large aeration basins. These are much larger than the activated sludge systems, and we have multiple mixers, which are basically impalers, which ensure proper aeration, and the water is retained in this aeration basins for a considerable period of time, an extended period of time, and the microorganisms utilize these excess nutrients, and eventually the biomass that is produced, they are sort of exhausted after the extended period of aeration, and we have the water that is eventually treated. Finally, we have tertiary treatment. Now, this is again a very expensive step of wastewater treatment. Uh, Although, unlike secondary treatment, here we have in chemical interventions, we use strong chemical agents to remove excess nutrients like, say, nitrogen or phosphorus. And in secondary treatment, we saw that there was significant technological intervention. We had aeration basins, we had mixers, we had um, distribution booms in case of trickling filters. Here, the water that still contains some pollutants like excess nutrient and like excess phosphorus or excess nitrogen. Now, these can be removed chemically. To remove phosphorus, we can precipitate the excess phosphorus by the addition of, let's say, lime or some chemical agent, which results in the formation of insoluble precipitates of phosphates like iron phosphate or calcium phosphate if we use lime. Alternatively, there are certain microorganisms that can also utilize this phosphorus and accumulate polyphosphates as biomass. But chemical methods are more common. Again, with the removal of excess nitrogen, we can we can use the volatilization of ammonia at very high pH. Alkaline treatment uh, can lead to the removal of ammonium as NH3 gas. This is called ammonia stripping or nitrogen stripping. And of course, ammonia can be chlorinated. Now, the chlorination step also removes certain pathogens which may not be treated, which may not be removed during the secondary treatment. So chemical treatment like chlorination ensures that the pathogenic organisms that are usually found in fecal contamination gets removed in tertiary treatment by chlorination. In secondary treatment also, the excess when the excess biomass is removed, that sludge can entrap the some of the coliform organisms or some of the contaminant microorganisms. But chlorination or treatment with excess alkali or lime, these also ensure the removal of some pathogens of concern that are usually found when water is contaminated with fecal matter. Now there is an interesting process here known as Anamox process, where it is the anaerobic oxidation of ammonia in absence of oxygen. So basically ammonium reacts with nitrite to produce nitrogen and water. So there is removal of ammonium as well as nitrite in the form of nitrogen gas with the production of water. Now this is a very new process, I would say, that has been discovered in this last few decades and is now actively being explored for wastewater treatment to update our wastewater treatment technologies. Now, this process, the conventional wastewater treatment, like I said before, uses multiple tanks or engineered systems in a sequential manner. And of course, there is significant energy um, intervention, energy cost, as well as technological intervention. Now, there is a much more simpler treatment technology that can be used. These are known as treatment wetlands. Now, treatment wetlands are also uh, they can be natural treatment wetlands or they can be engineered treatment wetlands, and these can also be used in sequential manner. And here we seek intervention using biological agents like plants, like macrophytes. We know like water hyacinth can be used. Now water hyacinth um, can be a natural accumulator of oil and grease, can be a natural accumulator of heavy metals like particularly mercury. Sometimes water hyacinths and other aquatic macrophytes can accumulate these heavy metals or oil and grease contamination, and these treatment systems can be used in a sequential manner. There can be uh, broadly two types of treatment wetlands depending on the direction and nature of the water flow. One can be vertical percolation, where the water from a mechanical clarifier is introduced vertically, and the macrophytes, the floating macrophytes, can actually will remove some of the excess nutrients or contaminants or pollutants. Now these can be connected in a sequential manner, and this helps us to remove pollutants like suspended solids, BOD, organic nitrogen, as well as phosphorus. Now these vertical flows can be interconnected with horizontal flows. As horizontal flows can be of two types: surface flow and subsurface flow. In subsurface flow, the water flows to the subsurface of the treatment wetland, and these contain usually rooted macrophytes that accumulate nitrites as well as phosphates. So they remove the excess nutrients that are present in wastewater, and then this can be interconnected to other vertical flows in this kind of series. And finally, the water that we get by connecting these treatment wetlands is relatively cleaner from where we started. It is much more it has been much more purified, and this can be used either for agricultural purposes or for surface water discharge like irrigation and different uses. So this is covers most of our wastewater treatment technologies that we have for domestic sewage, which is single largest form of wastewater in the world. Now that brings us to the conclusion of this presentation, and I will finish this with a quote from Madame Marie Curie, who said that nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. And with these words, I will conclude this session. Thank you very much for listening.